Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
You're on mute,
under God,
Cable.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's doing a pledge of allegiance, that's why.
They can't
You might
see.
want to ask them to mute themselves when they're not
Yeah, right.
speaking to us.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website at www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Before we jump into the meeting, just a note to everybody that's watching on Zoom or participating on Zoom, you have a chat room. We cannot see that, but if you do chat, anything that's put into the chat section is public record, even if you're privately chatting between members. So just keep that in mind, that your chat is part of the public record.
We're going to discourage chatting, especially when we can't see what it is, even allow it? Is it?
Well, I think open session, we agreed to allow chat. I'm logging into the Zoom meeting now because I want to see if I can see it.
Okay.
And then once we close the open session, other than for hearings, chatting would be closed anyways. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, I have it up, so I'll be able to see the chat box now. Okay. So going to the agenda, the first item we'll see.
Public service.
Get in there. So you want to do the public service announcements? Thank you.
Do we have anyone from the Board of Health in the meeting? Okay, I'll read it. The Chelmsford Board of Health will be holding 2 flu clinics. The first is for people 65 years of age and older only. It will be Wednesday, October 14th and Thursday, October 15th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Chelmsford Senior Center at 75 Groton Road. The second is a drive-through clinic at the Department of Public Works at 9 Alpha Road on Tuesday, October 20th and Tuesday, November 17th from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. For both flu clinics, masks are required by everyone. A high-dose formula will be available. You must pre-register for your vaccine by calling the Board of Health at 978-250-5241 to reach Donna Greenwood. Registration for the 65 years of age and older closes on Wednesday, October 7th. Registration for the second flu clinic closes on Wednesday, October 13th. And you need to bring any and all insurance cards, and they're asking that you please wear a short sleeve shirt.
What's the time, please, Virginia, on the 20th? You didn't. I don't think you mentioned what time that.
So the general one on October 20th and November 17th will be from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Department of Public Works at 9 Alpha Road.
Yeah.
The one for 65 years of age and older only will be on October 14th and October 15th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Chelmsford Senior Center.
Thank you.
Paul, the next public announcement was Chief Spinney. Is he here?
He's on the Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
Chief,
Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. With regards to Halloween festivities, I have reviewed the Massachusetts Department of Public Health guidance, as well as the recommendations from the CDC. I've also spoken to a lot of members of the public, and I've met extensively with Public Health Director Sue Rosa regarding this. And basically, we believe that residents can safely participate in many Halloween activities if they exercise good common sense and practice appropriate social distancing. With regards to the Department of Public Health guidance sheet, I'm going to quickly go over that, as well as the CDC memo. Just as a reminder, COVID-19 prevention and mitigation standards shall apply to all activities in Massachusetts, including Halloween activities. Residents should adhere to each of the following: wear a face mask or face covering, observe good hand hygiene, carry hand sanitizer and use it often, especially after coming into contact with frequently touched surfaces and before eating candy. Refrain from touching your face. Stay at home and refrain from Halloween activities if you feel unwell, if you've tested positive for COVID-19, if you have been exposed to someone with COVID-19, or if you've traveled to or from a state that is not classified as low risk. The CDC has also broken down many Halloween activities into 3 risk levels, and I want to go over that very quickly. Lower risk activities include carving, decorating with members of your household, carving and decorating, obviously, pumpkins outside at a safe distance with neighbors or friends, having a virtual Halloween costume contest, having a scavenger hunt, a type trick-or-treat search with household members around your own home, having a small group outdoors, open air costume party where people have distanced themselves 6 feet apart, attending a costume party held outdoors where protective masks are used and people can remain more than 6 feet apart. Some moderate risk activities include participating in one-way trick-or-treating, where individually wrapped bags are lined up for families to pick up while continuing to social distance, such as the end of a yard or driveway. Having a small group outdoor costume parade where people appropriately social distance. Visiting pumpkin patches or orchards where people use hand sanitizer before touching pumpkins or picking apples. Wearing masks should be enforced, and people are able to maintain proper social distancing. Higher risk activities include participating in traditional trick-or-treating where candy is handed to children who go door to door, especially if this was to include a large number of residences with people you don't know. Attended crowded costume parties held indoors. Going to an indoor haunted house where people may be crowded together. Or going on hay rides or tractor rides with people other than people that are in your household. Additional concerns to consider: a costume mask is not a substitute for a cloth mask. A costume mask should not be worn over a protective cloth mask. It can be dangerous if the costume mask makes it hard to breathe. Instead, consider using a Halloween-themed cloth mask. So those type of things are classified as a higher risk Halloween activity. Again, most Halloween activities are outdoors. And I think it's important that we all remember these activities are optional. And if residents don't wish to participate, either by not going out or not having people come to their door, that's certainly their prerogative. I've spoken to several police chiefs in the area, and they appear to be leaning in the general direction that we are, or that I'm proposing, as a result of the DPH and CDC guidelines. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chief.
So Chief, what's the time for the traditional trick-or-treating if people choose that option?
6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Will we also be having any kind of last-minute alteration, as if, like when we do when there's a storm, so that if there is a spike, we'll put that out there and say, look, time out, we're not doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping originally to delay this another week or two, but because of your scheduled meetings, that really wasn't going to work out. But I fully agree that if all of a sudden we see some unforeseen events or we go in a real bad direction, I will confer with Public Health Director Rosa, and I would inform the board immediately through the town manager.
Thank you.
And will you be posting all this on the town website, the front page, so that people know all about the different levels and what's allowed?
Yep, so I reached out to Christina Bruce today and the town manager, and pending your approval, that'll be posted on the town website as in addition to the links to the CDC and the DPH. And I'll also put it on the Chelmsford Police Facebook page.
Okay, thanks.
Paul, is there someone that can put it onto some of the town pages? Because there's already a lot of people asking the question of what the
Yeah, once we put it on our website, it goes out to Facebook and social
Okay,
media,
good.
yeah, Twitter and so forth, yeah.
All right, perfect, thank you. Thanks, Chief.
All right, have a good evening.
Oh,
Thank you.
does he need us to make a decision or no?
Oh, it's a public
No, I
service
think that's
announcement.
it. I
Okay,
think we're just
good.
sticking with the CDC.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with that brings us to open session. If there's anybody that would like to address the board in open session, please either raise your hand or post in the chat box and we'll unmute you.
And I do have one email that was
Yep.
requested.
Actually, why don't we do that? We're going to have Virginia read an email she has that was asked to be read into open session, and we will wait to see if anybody chimes in on the chat box. So we'll start with you, Virginia.
Sure. This was sent by Jerry Lowe to the Select Board and Paul Cohen on September 27th. And he understands that the presentation for Warren Poll is off the agenda tonight, but felt that his comments were still relevant to whatever path forward is taken. Dear Selectmen and Town Meeting Reps, please have this read at the Selectmen's meeting on September 28th, 2020. I was very excited to hear about the town's movement to acquire the Warren Poll land for open space purposes. I am not quite an abutter, but live close by on Hall Road. Over the last 20 years, I have been able to hike, cross-country ski, and sled on the property with the kind permission of the owners. I have just read the ad hoc committee's recommendations. I did not hear about the public input meetings until after the fact, and several neighbors and abutters have expressed common concerns. First, the idea of creating leased artisanal farms above and beyond the haying that has been done for the last 40 years is very disconcerting. The open area where these artisanal farms would be located would render the open spaces unusable. But more importantly, it would destroy the natural beauty inherent in the current landscape. These fields are home and sustenance to wildlife there. There is also the possibility of farm runoff entering into Putnam Brook, a perennial stream. At the public input sessions, a majority of the townspeople, neighbors, and abutters expressed a desire for the land to be utilized for passive recreation first, while maintaining the current open space by seasonal haying of the open meadows. The idea of artisanal farming on leased lots appears to be the idea of Phil Stanway, the principal author of the Ad Hoc Committee's report. He likens the Warren Poll property to Sunny Meadows, a site with distinctly different topographical and environmental features from the Warren Poll land. I have been friends with the Warren and Poll families for many years, and I can say with confidence that this was not their intent. The intent is to keep it as natural as possible for the enjoyment of open space. The proposed chicken coop is also problematic. A rooster with a brood of up to 50 hens will impact the abutting neighbor's tranquility and could adversely affect property values. I will be glad to address other concerns about the specific recommendations of the Ad Hoc Committee's report in a follow-up letter. Sincerely, Jerry Lowe, 38 Hall Road.
Thank you, Virginia.
Yep.
I don't see anything in chat, and I don't know if anybody from Chelmsford Media saw anything, but with that, we'll move on from.
But Joanne Stanway's trying to grab your attention, I see her
Oh, she
waving.
is. Joanne, I will. I'm going to assume. Let's see if we can get her turned on. Joanne, are you there? Did you want to speak?
I am.
We can hear you. Did you want to speak?
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the fact that the ad hoc committee member, Phil Stanway, my husband, was named when this was a committee that put together this report. There were recommendations, not anything that was etched in stone. And the report was reviewed by a committee and by the town, went through 14 revisions before anything was prepared for submission tonight. Yes, it is off of the agenda, but I just wanted it to be clear that I think it's inappropriate to name one member of the committee when this was a committee decision with several other people involved in reviewing the report that was submitted by the ad hoc advisory board. So put that on the record, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Nancy
And-
Arroway,
yep.
waste of-
1 second. Nancy, you're good to go?
Thank you much. Just a fast comment on that. I'm a town meeting rep, and when I voted on it as a town meeting rep, it had been advertised and promoted as agricultural land. It was listed in the warrant as agricultural. And I really feel like, while I can understand that the direct abutters don't want anything on that property, that they want it left open, I really feel like this is a bait and switch. And if the agricultural element is removed from it, I really believe it should go back to town meeting in October for another vote that accurately represents the intentions of use for the property. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Kevin, may I just have a comment?
Sure.
I just, for the discussion regarding the warrant articles, that'll be later in the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, I don't see anybody else flagging me down or putting anything in the chat, so we will move to committee vacancies.
Okay, so these are the committee vacancies. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 2 open positions. The Board of Appeals has 1 open position. The CCA Advisory Committee has 3. The Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 2, and the Commission on Disabilities has 1 open position. The Community Action Program Committee has 1 position open. The Community Preservation Fund Committee has 1 open position. The Council on Aging has 5 associate member positions. The Energy Conservation Committee has 3 positions open. The Historic District Commission has 1. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 1. The Middlesex Canal Commission has 2. The Parade Committee welcomes all applicants for 1-year terms. The Permanent Building Committee has 1 position open. The Personnel Board has 1 position open. The Public Celebrations Committee has 5. The Recycling Committee has 1, the Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 1, and the Tree Committee has 3 positions open. If you are interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an application available on the town website or contact the town manager's office at tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov, telephone 978-250-5202.
Thank you, Virginia. Item 5 on the agenda are licenses, and we're going to discuss an extension to the temporary outdoor dining beyond the November 1st, 2020 date.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the board's last regular meeting, Governor Baker released additional guidance for outdoor seating, which basically pushed back the original November 1st deadline that had been established, for the outdoor seating way back in June. And now basically the expiration is 60 days after the end of the pandemic public state of emergency. And obviously the big difference now as you're heading into the winter months is the condition of heating, heaters for the outdoor seating. So we immediately, Christina Bruce, again, as she has all along this process, immediately got the information out to the businesses. Some businesses have already established outdoor heating, and others have really been put into communication that if they wish to have this, here's the information. Most notably, the concern is public safety in terms of, fire safety, in terms of the issues of carbon monoxide, fire safety hazards, and also in terms of snow load for the tents and so forth. So we wanted to bring this to the board and the community's formal attention of the changes. And at the last vote that this board took, you would administer the guidelines in accordance with the governor's order to allow this to take place. And I guess we're just looking for a confirmation or a vote that we would extend the authority you granted back in June, to the indefinite future at this point, as established by the governor.
Paul,
Yeah.
the documents say that extensions can be granted for any period up to 60 days past the end of the state of emergency.
Exactly.
Do you see any reason not to just extend it that way?
No, because, I think that's the best way to do it.
And we can always pull it back,
You can always
right?
pull it back at any time, but I think that's the best way to do it at this point in time. We don't know what the demand will be. We've obviously never gone into a winter or holiday month season like this, but I think the idea is to allow the flexibility, but most importantly, remind the residents and the establishments that the key consideration here is public health and public safety.
So I do have a question. I assume that the fire department will have something to say, as will building inspector or DPW or
Yes.
somebody about the load for any snow. And I would also assume that it's clearly, I'm going to trust that business owners are not going to put themselves in a situation where they would be liable for injuries caused by snow load, carbon monoxide poisoning, burns, and everything else. So long as everyone is
Mhm.
following the guidelines and paying attention to safety, if you want to eat outside in December, go ahead.
And also, you'll be doing your traditional annual license renewals in a couple of months, and so they'll be going out again.
Yeah.
So yes, this
Yeah,
is
so if there's any
public-
issues that pop up, you can
Yeah,
always.
I mean,
public health.
Dealing with the
this
licensing.
is, I feel like it might put more of a burden on inspections,
Yeah.
but
And the fire department has decided, Chief Ryan, I know he's on the call if he wants to jump in, but they're actually going to waive the inspection fee as a way to helping out the establishments as well.
Right.
I don't know,
From what I've heard, it's been a run on the heaters.
Yeah.
So a lot of restaurants are having trouble getting the heaters, but,
Oh, there's Chief.
yeah, Chief Ryan, do you want to add anything?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So we'll go back, we're gonna have to go back several times because you mentioned the snow, the heat. We do have carbon monoxide detectors in the tents. So that will involve the fire department, obviously Sean Shanahan, the building department, the health department. So I anticipate many visits to these locations. But we've done that through the pandemic and we'll continue to do that going forward.
Right.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Does George have any comments?
George, do you want to add anything?
he's muted.
Oh, hold on one second.
No, I think you covered everything, and I think the chief has it pretty much under control. So.
Okay. Does
Thank
anybody
you.
else, have any comments, inputs? So you need a formal vote?
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
good to have a formal vote on the record, please.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something? I make a motion to extend the temporary outdoor dining for the period of 60 days past the end of the state of emergency as presented.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, all in favor? Aye.
Do we have to do it by roll call since he's remote?
Well, I was just going to ask George to, at the end, speak up.
Oh.
Yep.
Is that an aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, so that will bring us to item 7 on the agenda, right, Paul? Are we,
Yeah, you're going to pass over item 6. yeah.
we're skipping over 6, right?
Can we
Can we
just confirm that the purchase and sale will be executed, the sale will be
Yeah, we're-
executed this week?
We're scheduled to close on Thursday, October 1st.
Uh-huh.
And, yes. and I will notify you. I checked with town council at the end of last week, and actually he'll be here later this evening, but he informed me everything was on schedule as, for the closing on Thursday.
And will there be any preservation clauses in that purchase and sale according to the owner's wishes?
No, we can only do what's authorized by town meeting. The preservation clauses will go into the conservation restriction that this board will approve on the property most expected with the land trust. So that's when it's all ironed out in that process. I exchanged an email today with Dale Williams. He's gathering information for that conservation restriction, and and we're also going to do a baseline survey of the property for the current condition. So that's when it'll all transpire.
But as I understand it, if the family isn't comfortable with the preservation restrictions or approach, that the sale could be in jeopardy.
I spoke to.
That's my opinion.
That's
I know members of this board have spoken to the Pohl family. I spoke to the Pohl family today. All the assurances that I've given, I think, from what I understand you've given, have assured them that there's nothing to be concerned about. That the intent of the town is to fulfill the desires of the family's wishes and the town's wishes to preserve the property.
so. How do we
But
assure that?
I don't have the legal authority, after the town meeting vote, to put that into the deed.
Paul, can you pull up that town meeting vote? Because my understanding and my understanding was that it was to be preserved. Like
Yes.
it's meant to be open space.
Right.
And so if there's haying to preserve meadow space,
Yeah.
but
Now,
I
where
mean,
the trip up is, and let me just give everybody listening at home and anybody who has any questions, is the way the ad hoc committee presented was options, specifically just options. It's not etched in stone, it's not a
Right.
requirement that it would include. Now, they eliminated the option for cows, pigs, livestock. That's not an option, but there was a chicken option put in there as just a thought. We could put a chicken coop or something. The Pohl family does not want, in the Pohl and Warren families do not want chickens, specifically a coop with roosters crowing, 500 feet from their house, at 4 in the morning. That wasn't their intent with the property, was not to turn it into a chicken barn. They wanted to allow haying, open fields, trails, the townspeople to be able to park and walk it and enjoy it and allow the haying. But that was the extent of the farming, was the haying.
They didn't want the farming either, like the Sunny Meadows type farming. They didn't
Right.
want that at
That
all.
was my-
They
that
just
was
want some
my-
hayfields,
yeah.
like 2 or 3
Right.
acres of
And that-
hayfields that get farmed.
that was my understanding as well. So
And
I'm
then-
trying to figure out where the town meeting vote came up with, this micro farm concept.
I think my view of what happened is agricultural was one of the purposes listed in the town meeting warrant.
And that's
But
just
no,
meant hay.
but there was, in hindsight, there's a misalignment on what agricultural or limited agricultural means.
Okay, because
So-
I figured that was just a cover for the hay. Like
That's
we're still
right, that's what many of us thought.
Most people thought. And being as Paul said, he spoke with the family today. I spoke for probably over an hour yesterday with them, and they made it very clear, and to Virginia's comment, I was told yesterday, if chickens is an option, we're not signing
Right.
any purchase and sale. So they wanted to be clear that chickens were not an option on the property.
I don't think they'll sign if the artisanal farms is an option.
Well,
Because it'll
it's-
just ruin
but
the
it's
vista.
up to us to decide, just because it's in that report doesn't mean it has to
Right.
No, I
happen.
know, but
so
but it was brought up, and we've all gotten several emails about
Yeah.
this. So I think it's worth a discussion, especially where it's on the
Right.
actual agenda.
But I think we just need to make it clear to the board, because as Paul said, the town has no legal ability to write that into the deed. It wasn't granted at town meeting. But as a board, we need to understand the Warren and the Pohl families' intention here is not to allow that option. So
Right.
when we write the covenant and we approve the
Conservation restriction, yeah.
restriction, the wording, it should be in a.
So help me understand the process then. The conservation restriction that then becomes legally binding?
Yes, and the town meeting authorized the Board of Selectmen to enter into a conservation restriction on the property.
That's what I-
But that occurs after the transaction. Now, we already have a signed purchase and sale.
Right.
We have a closing scheduled on Thursday.
So we-
And I think the message is already being heard because the latest version of the committee's report removes the chicken discussion. It's
And I
entirely
would
removed.
say, that, you know, the concept of artisanal community farms and community chicken coops is awesome. And that could be great in another part of town, but I mean,
Not here.
that was not the purpose of this,
Right.
so.
And that's why this board and the Chelmsford
Right.
Land Conservation Trust are going to enter into a permanently recorded document that identifies and allows the uses for the property, much like we have at Sunny Meadow Farm, Sheehan Farm, Hart Pond, and so forth. And I'll even
Who
go to,
controls that document? Conservation or Board of Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen signs that document.
But like in perpetuity, it's the board.
The Board of Selectmen is authorized by that town meeting vote to enter into the conservation
Okay.
restriction with the
And can that be
nonprofit land
changed
trust.
later, by a future board?
You'd have
You'd
to,
have-
you'd have to have
you'd
the
have to get
consent, you'd have to have the consent of the.
Town
third-
meeting.
n-
And the conservation. Committee.
Conservation, no, you have to,
Oh.
you have to have the consent of the
Whoever
land
whoever
trust.
has it, whoever
Third-
has
Whoever
that.
holds the restriction.
Okay.
But I'll even go further to reassure you and to them. My recommendation is the agent for the town in the conservation restriction should be the Conservation Commission.
Right.
The town manager is the agent for Sunny Meadow Farm and for Sheehan Farm. So I'm saying, in light of the issues that have arisen, my recommendation to you would be that the Conservation Commission be the agent for the town. Why would that differ? Because, one is you'd have the 7 people who serve on the commission, who sit around the table, who are town residents, the volunteers and so forth, would be that board who would manage the property, much like they managed other town-owned properties from Russell Mill to, you name it, right, reservation and so forth. Because then that way it's not an outsider. I don't know who me or my successor would be in terms of managing that thing, and therefore if you have that be the vehicle, then it assures the residents, the abutters, because this is a different property. This has neighborhood abutters that are very different than Sunny Meadow Farm or Sheehan Farm, and so therefore I think that's the distinction that
Can you
should take
make it
place.
more restrictive to, it's not just conservation, but then it has to, if conservation approves it, then it has to go to town meeting for approval?
Well, but that becomes an administrative burden. Every particular use would then go to a town meeting for a vote for a particular use on the property. In essence, I think you have the commission do it, and be the agent for the town, and you got the land trust on the other side. Let me give you an example of how it works. Right now, we have a proposal at Sunny Meadow Farm for the growing of mushrooms, next to the greenhouse, where the fellow who grows the leafy vegetables. That's now being reviewed by the land trust. They don't have a concern with it. I sent it out to the fire chief, building inspector, and so forth, requesting a document. When that comes in, I'll share that with you when it comes to fruition, and then basically that's how it's approved. So there are safeguards, and it is a public process.
And Ken, quite frankly, I think having a land trust and a conservation commission basically jointly having
Yeah,
enforcement
I think
authority
that's
is
fine.
even firmer than town meeting because they're experts at that. That's what they do.
So would the Board of Selectmen have to turn over their rights to the,
It's not turning over rights. You basically, you sign the restriction, and in the restriction, you identify the agent for the town as
Okay.
the Conservation Commission.
all right.
So you're right.
So it's not something we have to decide tonight. We can go do our research, read
Exactly.
about it, and come back and say, okay, this
Exactly.
makes sense or doesn't make sense, and
Right.
here's why.
Right, and so
Okay.
my thought would be is when the ad hoc committee completes its report, you would accept the report, and then my advice would be then forward it to the Conservation Commission for, formally, so they have that. And then with the transaction, have that move forward.
Paul,
of the
how are the
parties.
board or director of the land trust chosen? Like.
They're chosen amongst the land trust.
Okay.
So they choose their own.
The land trust is made up of just Warren and Pohl families, or?
No, the Chelmsford Land Trust is made up of the members of the land trust. They have a board of officers, which includes Becky Warren. Dale Williams is the president, and there are about a half dozen or so officers
At
on the
least
land
that
trust.
many,
At
yeah.
least that.
Yeah.
Is there a way to involve the representation from the Warren Pohl family in that process?
There is one. Becky Warren. is
Becky
on
Warren's
it.
on there.
Well, I understand she's on that, but
Right. But again, I think the discussions would take place they'll take place at this table when you sign the
okay,
conservation
so they
restriction.
could, they could come in and speak
And
if
they would also
wanted
come into
to.
the public meetings of the Conservation Commission if there's ever a use. So that's what I'm saying. I think that's sort of belt and suspenders, which I think should be a reassurance to the Warren Pohl family and the abutters that there'll be, a conservation theme regarding the use of that property. I think that's the best way to handle it
Right.
in light of what's been raised.
Well, I just want to say, after, speaking with the family yesterday and reiterate it to everybody listening, to me, it's not a purchase, it's really a gift, because
Right.
that kind of acreage at that price is definitely a gift, and it's a gem in the town. And it would be a shame if something were to, go off kilter here, So, if, I'm hoping if anything comes up over the next few days, that they
Yeah.
reach out to us, because to me, it's just such a huge blessing to get your hands on a piece of land like this that we can preserve for our kids and grandkids. And such an amazing piece of property, so, I think we have to let them know that, their wishes are gonna be followed through on, and we're here to protect that.
And as we know, the issues just aren't limited to farming. We've already, the committee obviously identified issues of parking,
Yep.
access, and so forth. And again, I think that's the best vehicle is Land Trust on one side, Conservation Commission on the other side. The Board of Selectmen is the oversight and executor of the document. I don't know any further we can go in terms of that.
Yeah, it's as strict as we can get, really.
Yeah.
Well, and I like the extra checks and balances
Yeah.
that land and conservation would bring,
Yeah.
so.
But again, thank you to the Poll and Warren family.
And thank you also to the committee. I know there was a fair amount of
Right.
effort that went into
Yeah,
this, so.
and like I said, I feel like that model could be used elsewhere, and I think it's worthwhile looking into. I think that we could do some interesting things with that, especially if you tie in, the Neshoba with that. I think it is an interesting proposition, and I think we could explore how to do something like that, but.
Well, along those lines, and on what Virginia says, the ad hoc committee, I think, put a lot of work and time and
Really
effort
did.
into that report.
Yeah.
It was an impressive report.
Yeah.
Maybe it can be used at Sunny Meadows to do the chickens and bring forward the option to have Neshoba work with
Right,
them.
and I mean, I think we also have to be mindful, it was a very short-term,
Oh,
quick
it's
look.
correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's-
Usually we take much longer with these kind of things, so.
I mean, I would love to see that site implemented, or those ideas and concepts implemented somewhere, especially if you can do a venture with Neshoba Tech
And I
and
think even as short as it
veterinarian.
was, like, some of
Yeah,
those
there's still-
ideas have been marinating for a while, so this was not like, off the cuff. Like, these are ideas that have, good depth and attention to detail, so I do think that it's worthwhile for that to be saved, so I hope it hasn't been deleted, at all, 'cause that would be regrettable. But I think we could use it elsewhere, or at least parts of it, so.
Any comments, Pat?
I'm all set.
George, you want to add anything?
No, the committee, I know the committee worked very hard. They put like an 84-page document together. They had all kinds of variations. And, there were some other people who, I know Mr. Paul said to me he was upset that his son Eric wasn't on the committee. I know they tried to contact him. I see that he's tonight on he's a participant here, so, I don't know if he has anything special to say, but I mean, Mr. Poe was very nice last night. He just, but I would like to make sure that they're very happy before the whole thing is signed. We kind of gave our word. I just gave mine, and I know, Kenny, I know you spoke to him as well, because he told me that the only two people he was able to reach at that particular time were you and myself. So I think other people probably got to him later as the evening progressed. But I would like to thank the committee for putting all that work in there and all the various options. And like you said, I hope whatever isn't being used there maybe can be worked into one of the other parcels that we have. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anything in the chat box, but
It's-
I know, but George had asked if anybody wanted to speak, so with that, we'll move on to item 7.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is the agenda item for presentations regarding the October 19th following the town meeting warrant. I'd ask as a courtesy to some of the presenters that we take them out of order and allow them to proceed. So I think the first one in terms of numerical order would be Paul Vergazio, who has 4 citizen petition articles, Articles 11 and 12 regarding free cash to reduce the levy, and Articles 14 and 15 regarding general stabilization fund to reduce the tax levy.
So is this my turn to present?
Yes, it is.
Hello, everybody?
Yes.
Is that who you want to take first, Paul?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, Paul, Mr. Regazio, you want to?
My name is Paul Regazio, and I'm a town meeting rep from the 3rd District, 3rd Precinct. I want to thank you for allowing me to explain the intent for the 4 warrant articles I filed. I was previously aware that there was a $1 million plus surplus. That excludes the sewer interest and the land purchase. So I understand the surplus may even be higher. So my comments may be on the light side, which can be adjusted between now and the town meeting. My overall objective is to eliminate the budgeted 2.5% property tax increase that's included in the town, the budget that was approved in June. In a pandemic year, this is not the time to increase taxes. And that 2.5% property increase amounts to $2.5 million. Ought to put surplus funds into the stabilization fund. This takes funds out of the local economy. Let's help our taxpayers and the local economy, and now is the year. I've gone over the town budget, even though I didn't attend the meeting, and I'm in agreement with what the town budget includes, except for, as I previously said, the 2.5 property tax increase that's included in it, and I understand that was used to balance the budget. And I also am in agreement with the $2 million coming out of the stabilization fund to offset the lowest town in the state revenues. This I agree with. As I said, what I don't agree to is the 2.5% property tax increase that everybody will see this year. My first warrant is to apply $1 million of the free cash to offset at least part of this budgeted property tax increase and put that money into our residents' hands and the local town businesses that are suffering under this pandemic. They need any help we can provide. Putting that money into a bank account or a town bank account for future benefit, the best word I could come up with is heartless. Everyone needs help this year. Future years can take care of themselves. The local economy needs our help today, not in the future year. My second warrant is just, I'm not certain what the exact amount that will be left over after the previous warrant articles are approved and after the $1 million is approved. And that would take up the balance of the free cash so that all of it goes to apply against the current year property, the future year property tax increase. The third warrant requests the transfer of $1 million from the stabilization fund, again, to be applied against and to offset a 2.5% property tax increase. If the town can transfer $2 million to offset and to balance the budget, and as I said, I agree with that, then I don't see why there cannot be an additional at least $1 million to be transferred to offset the budgeted property tax increase. This will offset hopefully the total $2.5 million property tax increase. This also puts another $1 million into the local economy. I understand $1 million reduction only amounts to maybe $50 or $100 per property owner, but that's looking at the small end of it. The big end is the $1 million or the $2.5 million that will be spent locally by our residents and by our businesses. And if the $1 million, if this $1 million remains in the stabilization fund, it does no good to anybody. Even after, and again, as we all know, the U.S. government has transferred $2 trillion, if not more, to keep the economy going. And even with these fund transfers, the free cash and the stabilization fund, I still believe there will be $8 to $9 million in the stabilization fund, and which is within the 5 to 10% range that the town wants to keep the stabilization fund. So again, the fourth warrant article is just as if there's additional need to transfer at the town meeting, which I leave open to the town meeting reps. And again, hopefully the select board, the finance council, and the town meeting members will agree with my articles, and that's, in the future to be determined. Since this is my first time ever presenting a warrant, I'm not certain if I need to go before also the finance council, which I can do. Very happy to do that, and you'll have to advise me as to how and when. So I have no documents to present to include in the town meeting book, but that's my thought. Again, we need to help our local residents, local businesses, and this is the way to do it. Let's not put more money into, bank accounts for future use. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Can we ask
So-
questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Does anybody?
I was gonna say, we should tell Paul how we should join the finance committee.
Yeah, they're scheduled to meet Thursday evening at 7:30. Their agenda has not yet been posted, but I imagine it'll be posted tomorrow, which would be their deadline for Thursday.
They
That
were
would have the Zoom link and
They were
other
talking
information.
about starting earlier. Do you know if they're planning?
I
You
haven't
don't
seen
know
anything.
that?
I said the agenda has not been posted.
Now, will they reach out to Paul?
Yes, I
to
believe, I
invite
would
him?
expect Jim
Okay.
Clancy would.
Okay.
Once, again, the agenda hasn't been posted, but that would have the Zoom link, and again, it's on Thursday evening.
Paul, can you hear all that?
Yes, I did. As long as someone sends me something before Thursday, then I will be able to participate. I may be up in New Hampshire then, but I can still participate, so thank you. Any questions that we happen to answer?
Do you have a contact number for them, Paul, maybe?
Yeah, it'd be my 50, with my cell phone, 508-574-2436.
So I just have a question, Paul, and probably Paul.
Yeah.
The citizens petitions were submitted prior to the tri-board meeting that was held in September, where Paul Cohen presented a budget excess, I guess is what I call it, of $2.9 million because we received more state aid than anticipated after you had cut the budget. Right, so that 2.9 is intended to go back to the taxpayers, is that correct?
Yes.
So my question, Paul Ragazio, is does that change anything here in your recommendations where there's going to be 2.9 million going back to the taxpayers?
That probably, that changes it significantly. So again, that would, I would be in, I have to talk to Brian Latina just to check with him because he's the one that I've been working with. And again, that at least would eliminate the first two articles. Whether it eliminates the one taking money out of the stabilization fund, that I have to ask. The 2.9 million surplus is from the year ended June 2020. Is that correct?
No,
No.
what happened is when we left town meeting with a balanced budget, the state aid came in at level funded, which was beyond the expectation. At that meeting that Virginia referenced, that with the finance committee and the school committee joining the select board, the estimate at that time was that the end result would be the average property tax bill would increase somewhere in the range of $50 to $100.
For fiscal 21.
Fiscal 21. Now, what Mr. Ragazio was saying is he wants to eliminate that to close to zero as he can, recognizing the fact, I hope that he would understand that we're in a reval year, and there's also that shift of commercial to residential valuations, which, none of us can, get to that level of precision. So I guess what I'm hearing from him is he would like to make that tax increase be $0. So that
That's
50 to 100 that we incorporated what he's saying is he'd want to apply another $1 million to bring that to a projected ballpark approximate estimate of 0. That's how I understood his request.
Well, again, the 2.9 million surplus
Excess levy capacity is, yeah.
Or excess levy capacity, or
Yeah,
is that?
no, that's, we would be taxing that much below the levy limit, because as you noted, Paul, there's an allowable 2.5% increase.
Right.
What you want to do is basically have there be no tax increase to the average single family as much as we can get as close as we can. That's what I'm hearing him saying.
Yeah, that's my objective is, unless my associates disagree with me, I wanted to eliminate the 2.5% increase in taxes that is in the approved town budget, so, and I don't want any more funds going into the stabilization fund. You know, the stabilization fund is somewhere $8, $9, $10 million. If we eliminate the tax increase, then there's probably no need to dig further into the stabilization fund.
But the only challenge would be is if you applied the full amount of free cash, which roughly be 1.37 million, you'd be beyond the estimate that what I'm saying, you'd actually be funding below last year's tax.
You have a tax decrease.
Right, exactly. You'd have a tax decrease because, again, the ballpark is roughly $70 per million.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying. So that'll have to be sorted out.
And so,
Well,
when you,
there's no reason for not reducing taxes. I mean, that's not a mortal sin, is it? I mean,
Well, I'm not here to debate them. I'm just trying to explain the
Okay.
implications. That takes place at town meeting.
and so Paul, when you were recommending that the 1.3 million go into the stabilization fund,
Yes.
that brought the percentage up to 7.75 to get us between that 5 to 10%.
Right.
If 1.3 million or only 300K goes into the stabilization fund, do you know offhand what percentage we're at?
We can calculate that.
Okay.
It's going to
I
bring
think
it
it's
down.
like a difference of 0.7.
Oh, so we're still over 7%
Right.
in the
Roughly,
stabilization?
if I'm doing my math
Yeah,
right.
we'd have to, we can do those calculations, you know.
Okay.
What's the interest rate that the stabilization fund is earning?
John, what's your best guess on interest rate on stabilization fund at this point? John Souza, I know, is on the call.
Let me just make sure he is.
Yeah, he's muted right now.
Yeah, John, just give us 1 second. He's not unmuting, and I can't, I can't click on either. I can't get his camera.
There he is.
you go.
I think he's unmuted right now.
We can hear you, John. You there?
Yes, good evening, Chairman Lefebvre and members of the board. Sorry about that. Last year, we earned about $347,000 on all our investments, which roughly, just to give you rough numbers, it's about a 3% rate of return on the stabilization fund. It's mostly in fixed income and has some other investments. So, all things considered, with the pandemic, as many of you know, the markets kind of were up and down like a seesaw. I mean, during the height of the pandemic, we definitely, we didn't sell any of the investments, but of course, like all investors in the United States, we suffered some losses, but then we came back dramatically. So by the end of the fiscal year, we had a very positive return.
Yeah, that's actually an impressive return.
Yeah, what do you think?
Noted.
But it tended to wane, John, towards the end of the fiscal year, correct? The interest
Yes.
rates going forward, so would you expect a 3% return in fiscal '21?
Ish.
What I would expect going forward is the Federal Reserve, as everyone knows, has dramatically lowered interest rates to try to stimulate the economy. And what I'm seeing is a good reduction in interest rates. So my best guess sitting here tonight is we're not going to see 3%. We may see something lower, just because that's where the interest rate market is right now. And that, as we all know, that could change at some point.
Thank you, John.
again, one question I'm still not clear on, is my understanding that the free cash that was certified was something like 1.7 million, and now the state has provided additional funds so that we're up to like, there's another $1.5 million that's available to the town. And again,
How would you answer that, Paul?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, John. Basically, the extra state aid reduces our levy tax levy because we have not adjusted the budget. So if the state aid came in higher than was estimated at the time of the June town meeting, then that lowers the tax rate and the tax
Now-
bill because of the fact that we leave with a balanced budget.
So again, the 1.7 free cash that was certified, that applies to the year ended June 2020.
Yes.
The extra funding you're talking about is the year going forward. That's what I'm getting
Yes,
confused about.
yes. And you're looking to apply you're looking to apply last year's, the June 30th free cash to the year going forward. So it all gets put together.
Says the tax rate, but the extra state funding is gonna come in the year ended June 2021?
Yes, the year we're in right now, yes.
Okay, which you had projected was gonna go down $3-4 million.
Yes,
So
yes.
that projection is not true then?
right, that projection is revised based on the information that came out from the legislature and the governor, and that's why the property tax burden is going to go down.
Okay, and
Because
so that probably means that you won't need to take $2 million out of the stabilization fund to balance the budget going forward.
No, that's already been voted at town meeting in June. That accounts for the 2 million that we used 2 million to balance the budget. So that 2 million was already voted and included in the vote in June.
Okay, but the budget reflected about a $5 million reduction in state funding, and I think what I'm hearing is that's gonna be 1.5 million or less.
No, the budget, it wasn't a 5 million reduction in state funding. We put all the numbers into the best guidance that we had from the state, and it was around $3 million.
Okay, excuse me, the 1.5 is the local, yeah, 3.5 million. So the 3.5 million reduction that you budgeted is gonna be cut in half.
But it's not cut in half, because you're only talking one side of the equation. You also have the state assessments, which changed that number. So it's not just the state aid, it's also what the state assesses the community. And as we explained, when we put the budget that was approved back in June, plugging in the new state aid, taking out of that 1.7 the money that goes into the sewer stabilization fund, which is another 335,000, that also takes out of the equation. And then also with the capital funding that's proposed this fall, you also have an appropriation that has to go to the debt service of that, and that goes into that equation as well. And that, we discussed that the other evening, that amount was $396,000. So that's what I said. So when you put it all together, if the town meeting were to approve the capital request that's funded, along with these other adjustments in terms of state assessments, and the money that we take out of the free cash to the sewer stabilization fund, which is the source of those monies, they said, we estimated that there'd be somewhere around a $50 to $100 increase in the average single-family bill, which is roughly in the neighborhood of about $1 million increase in the tax levy from the prior year.
So again, we're seems like we're double talking, and again,
No,
the free cash for the year ended June 2020 was roughly $1.7 million.
it was $1,721,950.
Okay.
$550, yes.
I'm talking round numbers. And so and after we remove the interest and actually remove $100,000 or something for some land purchase, there's about $1 million of free cash from the year ended June 2020.
If you take the 1.7 million, you reduce the capital appropriation which was required, which was 396,000, and then you remove the amount that's required for the sewer stabilization fund, it's another 300,000. So you're at roughly, and the land purchase is only $16,200. So the end result comes to roughly around $1 million.
I don't know, I understand what the interest is. I don't understand what the other 390 or the 350,000.
Because if under Article 10, the capital request that's brought before the town meeting, we have debt service to pay in the fiscal year, as we would every year's capital request. And therefore, if we're going to fund roads, we're going to fund sidewalks, we're going to fund fire department turnout gear, and we're going to fund improvements to the Parker Middle School kitchen, and also fund the renovation of the McCarthy Auditorium, all of which adds up to $1,978,000. Many of those, 3 of those projects are funded over 5 years. The debt service on the first year of that project, for all those projects, is $396,337. So roughly $400,000 for lack of a round number.
You're making an assumption that we're funding that capital purchase, and again.
And those requests will come before the vote your article, so that the
Okay.
town meeting will decide what they're going to fund.
And again, I didn't want to get into this, but if the town buys the new school or the high school, again, that's 4 or 5 years in the future, what the hell are we spending $700,000 to renovate McCarthy that based on that plan would be empty? So again, I don't understand why we're spending capital money to fund a auditorium that may not even be used this year. I mean, I would be voting against that, and I would be asking everybody else to vote against that. The
Hey, Paul?
the land, the road things and all the other stuff, that I'm ambivalent about, but,
Paul?
and again, this will get argued at the town meeting.
Right. Paul, are you, we're getting, well beyond the scope of our discussion tonight, but, those are questions for capital planning, capital
Okay.
budgets and so forth.
Okay,
And
all right, okay. But again, as I said before, I want to eliminate the tax increase to the town people, and I want to eliminate any money going into the stabilization fund.
So if you could, Paul, maybe you and Brian could go back and watch the tri-board meeting where we got the presentation from Paul that was explained with FinCom and look at the numbers, figure out what you want to do and bring that to town meeting.
Okay, I tried to get into the meeting and I couldn't see it. Okay,
It's
whatever.
on YouTube.
Yeah, if you call me if you can't, and I'll see if I can find the link and email it to you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Just a quick housekeeping note. When we finish the meeting before we go into executive session, they got to do some stuff with the Zoom. So
Or
I'm
we can
being
put-
asked.
Or we can put George on a speakerphone, if that's easier.
Okay. Well, I just didn't know. They want to know if it should be put up as a recess or just
No,
stay
it'll be
live.
Oh,
over.
we're not coming back?
Okay. Well, they just mean the point where they get it squared away. So are we going to ask George to just call into that? And
It's
we-
whatever you prefer. You
Okay.
can do Zoom, or you can have them on a landline.
All right, Dan is just asking me. So, Dan, it sounds like we're going to, when we go into executive session, just drop the Zoom and we'll have George dial in for the session, just so I know you're listening, so we'll do it that way. Okay. We're back on track now. Who's up next, Paul?
The next one would be Article 16, that's the Historical Preservation and Reuse Bylaw. Again, we invited members of the Planning Board. I know Nancy Arroway's there, Mike Raisbeck. I also invited members of the Historical Commission, Historic District Commission. Again, I don't know who all is on, but I think Nancy will probably be the one who's prepared to start. She has a presentation that's been passed out to you in the packet.
All right, so Nancy, you're live. If
That'd be
you have
something.
other members that want to speak, I will watch the chat box, and if those members want to speak and they want to turn on their camera, we'll let them do that, but we'll start with you, Nancy.
Okay, thank you. I believe Deb's here to back me up on this. This is an article that's being put forward jointly by the Historical Commission and the Planning Board. It is, once again, a follow-up to articles that you've seen for the last couple years. It's another try. I'm not going to go through the presentation. I gave you two files. One is a map that shows possibly affected properties, and one is a PowerPoint presentation. The PowerPoint presentation is 3 parts. The first, sheet 2 through 7 is simply an iteration of the bylaw, and I would hope that you've read it by now, and I don't need to read it to you. Starting on page 8, it talks about the purpose, why we're doing this, how it differs, and basically this is the sales pitch. And then the last pages list the properties that could possibly be affected by this bylaw. So going to page 8, if you have the ability to post it there, it may be useful for folks at home to see it.
If you can bear with me, I will try to get that done. You said page 8?
It
I
looks
believe
this,
so.
Ken. This is purpose.
It's page 8 of the copy I'm looking at.
Is the one that
I
has the
don't know what's
purpose,
happened to it since then.
did it have the purpose moon
It
on
has
it?
purpose,
Okay.
exactly.
Just bear with me a second, Nancy. It's not opening.
Okay. Technology is wonderful.
Oh, it's great until you need it. Is there any way you can start to discuss it while I try to do this?
I can, and I'll start out talking about what the purpose that's on page 8. So basically the reason behind this all is that the entire region is going through a very, very high demand for additional housing. And because of our unique situation here, we're at the crossroads of the highways. We have a great school system that we've invested in, the open spaces, all the things that that got us voted into the top 50 places to live in the U.S. Have increased that demand for additional housing in the town of Chelmsford. We don't have vacant lots available. We're basically built out, and developers are looking for any alternative they can find to build fancy new houses to meet this demand. And this is creating an incredible risk to our historic residential architecture because it imposes the risk of it being torn down to build something else. So this bylaw is not about creating more lots. That's not its purpose, although it does have but although that's exactly what it does. But it is about providing incentives to owners and developers to preserve the existing historic structures that exist. So why are we trying to do this? I mean, we have failed 2 times at being able to increase density in order to protect properties, and we're trying it one more time. Well, publicly funded preservation is just not an option. There is no mechanism to use public funds for private property for that preservation. The prohibition on destruction doesn't work. It gives us a short time period, currently a year, for a demo delay, but the developers simply wait that out. So preservation restrictions can work on a property, but they're a lien on the property and the property owner has to sign up for them. They have a limited lifespan, and most owners are not going to accept those limitations without some sort of payback. So this bylaw is trying to provide that payback. And it literally is, we're looking at density as the currency to buy those preservation restrictions. Because we don't have any other currency to buy them with. We have absolutely nothing else except density that we can find to provide an incentive for property owners to sign a preservation restriction that limits what they can do with the properties. So what is this thing called a preservation restriction? Well, it's basically a voluntary legal agreement that protects a significant property. It's an assurance that the property's intrinsic values will be preserved, not only by the current owner, but by subsequent owners. It goes with the title to the land. It's filed at the Registry of Deeds, and the same way that your conservation restrictions are held by some party, a preservation restriction is also held. And in this case, it's typically held by the Historic Commission. The heart of the preservation restriction is the grantor's covenants, where the owner pledges what they will do to maintain that property. It typically, but not always, addresses just the exterior of the property, but it can be written to address valuable historic articles inside the property as well. It provides a baseline documentation that illustrates the property's significance, including its historic records, its photographs, why it's important historically. And historic preservation restrictions are not typically done in perpetuity. There is another mechanism that can be continue much longer, but historic preservations are typically for 30 years max, and they are renewable at that time. So that brings us to the properties, and I've separated out these properties into 5 different classifications. The Historical Commission, as we reviewed this draft again this year, decided that it's really, really important that the very old properties get a preservation incentives program. And because we've failed to get a bylaw passed that encompassed all of our historic properties, they decided this year that we would try to get this through with only the pre-18, up to properties that were built up to 1800. So I ran some surveys, some queries on the assessor's database, and came up with these classifications. So properties that are under 40,000 square feet simply do not meet the basic requirements of this bylaw. You have to have at least the conforming square footage and conforming the conforming square footage in order to use this bylaw. And 25 of the properties that were built before 1800 do not. 10 of these properties currently have historic status. The classifications 2 through 4 have the possible potential to use this bylaw, and properties in number 5 just plain don't need it. They're big enough that they could separate without placing any historic restrictions on the property under the bylaw. So let's talk about 2, 3, and 4. Number 2 is properties that are 40,000 to 60,000 square feet. So there's 2 different bonuses built into this bylaw. One is the separation into 2 half-sized lots, and the second one is the separation into 1 half-sized lot plus 1 half-sized back lot. So back lots by the terms of the bylaws, current bylaws, require twice as much area as a standard lot. So this would be a pipe stem lot. So anything between 40 and 60,000 square feet would have enough area to be able to qualify for 2 half-sized lots. it would not qualify for a half size and a pipe stem lot. So we have 24 of those properties. 11 of them are already classified as under historic status. So they would, if the land was laid out such that it could be divided, and if there was enough frontage to divide it, they could qualify under this group. Section 3, or the class 3, is properties between 60,000 and 80,000 square feet. These might have enough size to be able to qualify for the 2 half-size lots. And they also might have enough size to qualify as a half-size lot and a back lot. We have 3 properties. There's 7 properties that fit into this class, 3 of which are pre-qualified as historic status. And the 4th group is the 80,000 to 120,000 square feet. These properties may qualify for 2 lots without this bylaw. And they may also qualify for this bylaw for separation into pipe stem lots. So the difference between 3 and 4 is that the size in 4 may not need this bylaw in order to separate. For two lots, 2 building lots, it may, however, need this bylaw to separate into a back lot. There's 3 properties in this classification, and one of those is currently on our historic status. Okay. The next couple pages are the same map that you received in a separate handout. It's a lot easier to see in the separate handout. These are color-coded based on the diamonds that you saw on the previous page. So if you go to sheet 14, what's meant by may qualify? Well, there's a number of qualifications that have to be met. So it's not just the size of the lot. It has to be considered historically significant. The properties in the table that have a yes under historical are already qualified as historically significant. All of the rest of the properties on those sheets may be able to be qualified as historically significant, but would need to be submitted to the Historic Commission to be evaluated before they could consider using this bylaw. It has to have significant area to qualify. That was the classifications we looked at 1 through 5, but it also has to have enough area that it's buildable, that it isn't significant wetlands. And I have no way to be able to filter those tables and tell you which ones do and which ones don't. The existing properties have to be located in a place that allows separation of the property. The existing building has to be located in a place that allows separation of the property. So if they have a 40,000 square foot property, it could possibly, it may qualify for separation into 2 20,000 square foot lots. But if the building is right smack dab in the middle of it, you probably won't be able to make that separation. And it must have conforming area and conforming frontage to qualify for the 2 half lots, because the half lots are half the size and half the frontage requirements. So if you don't currently have the full frontage and the full lot size, you're not going to be able to comply. So the next slide talks about, but isn't 20,000 square feet too small? About 33% of our RB lots and about 70% of our RC lots are already that size or less. we basically only have the 40,000 square foot lots in areas that have been developed over the, probably the last 20, 25 years. Most other areas in town, you'll find much, much smaller lots in use. And these smaller lots are being proposed only as a method to buy a preservation restriction. They are not being proposed to be used everywhere in town for any reason. They are absolutely a benefit for a cost issue. Okay, I'm juggling 3 different computers here. Sorry, guys. So how is this different than what we rejected last year? Well, first of all, there's no density bonus on the existing structure. Last year, we proposed 3-family extensions. Remember that these properties qualified by right for 2-family extensions, and we had proposed a 3-family as our way to buy a conservation restriction. That is not included. This version applies only to properties built 1800 and before, and the previous versions included properties that were built through 1938. We have much fewer properties protected under this bylaw. There's currently less than 15 that are pre-qualified based on historic value. And in the previous version, we had 118 that were pre-qualified. And this bylaw focuses on our colonial and Georgian construction, typically the old farmhouses, and it offers no protection for the Victorian era structures that make up most of our town centers. And the rest of it is simply listings of properties. Deb, would you like to chime in here?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
We're just saying there's already one property that we're being waited out on. We're just trying to save our oldest houses because they're in danger. A lot of them sat on fairly good sized lots that they want to tear them down and put something modern there. And I just think it's going to affect the look of our town. This is our history and we're losing it. We don't have that many structures that this will affect, but they are important to our town's history, and we would just like to try to get this through.
Okay.
Questions? In terms of financial impacts, it's pretty small. You have the potential to gain a handful of new property taxes, and you end up with the expenses for the families that live there.
Realistically, how much of an impact on sewage does this have, since that is the latest big discovery?
I think the question is, could anybody build on these properties? Could you split a property and build on it under the current moratorium? Because these are not existing lots. These are newly created lots.
That's probably a fairly decent answer. I mean, you can't, until the moratorium is dealt with, none of them. Correct? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I will say, Nancy, that this is a little bit easier of a presentation to follow than the past go-arounds.
You're welcome.
Thank you. and the fact that you specifically outlined the houses, and you really, you skinnied it down for us too, as far as the number of houses affected, so.
I mean, we were just looking at this very matter-of-factly, the things that were most important to us to save.
Well, I mean, to me, it makes sense. You're taking a smaller bite of the apple. You know, you're focusing on the older houses. And if you can do that, and then, you know, if we start to see people focusing on demolishing the pre-1938 houses back to this 1800s, then you could take another shot at this later. But at least this goes after the really old, important homes in the town.
So I will tell you guys that I don't think this goes anywhere near far enough. And I think that the report that justified why Chelmsford was considered in the top 50 places to live kind of stated, you know, the importance of having town centers that have a history behind them. And there's very, very little in our town centers that will come under this bylaw. You really have to go up to about 1900 to do that. But I can also see the merit in getting what you can under protection. And I think we have to start somewhere.
Okay. Any other questions for either Deb or Nancy?
Is there any way to encourage developers rather than the sort of cookie cutter, like just modern large houses that they're building? Is there any way to encourage them to use designs that replicate some of the older buildings that maintain the proportions of more traditional and actual architectural detail in terms of massing and windows and consistency across form, but, you know, add things like closets that nobody needed back when anyone had, like, you know, one pair of shoes and two dresses. You know, I'm looking at, you know, there was this old house where they actually went and tackled one of this company. I think they've since split, but it was called like Connor Mill Built Homes, and it was like Legos but for grown-ups. They prefab it, you put it on pallets, you know, slot A goes into tab B, and all of a sudden you have a house, but it looks like a Georgian or a colonial or a Gothic or any one of these old beautiful styles that actually have some sense of proportion and have appropriate massing and window shapes that are consistent and not just like random, that don't look like they were designed from the inside out, that actually harmonize. And I'm wondering if there's a way to insist that developers take a really good crack at that before dumping, you know, these sort of like modern cookie cutter large
I'll
houses.
take it. I'll take the question, but I'm probably just rambling on it.
It's a rambling question.
I'm old enough that I remember the 70s, and we went through the centennial, and there was a lot of press. You know, all the magazines showed colonial houses, and everybody wanted one. They were in high demand. But it took that press to create a demand from the public, not from the developers, but from the public, to value those properties. And when the public wanted those properties and was willing to pay for them and maintain them, the developer community was created that was doing restorations. Well, we've moved way, way, way away from that type of architecture in our publications, in our magazines, in our newspapers. I mean, it's just not vogue anymore.
We don't have magazines anymore.
Yeah, the only way to create that demand is to create enough press that it becomes desirable. And when it becomes desirable and the public wants it, the developers will do it. My 2 cents.
Thanks, Nance. Any other questions?
Is George okay?
George, you good? Any questions? Oh, let me just see if he's, George, you're muted, but I don't know if you have any.
All set. I'm
Okay.
almost set.
All right, thank
Sorry.
you. Yep.
I guess you muted me, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Nan, or?
I don't have anything. Do you have anything else for me that you want to know?
Deb, you have anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I mean, to answer Emily's question somewhat, the public is not wanting these houses a lot anymore. They're wanting the big, I call them McMansions, with the open space and the big rooms and the high ceilings, and it's just a different style now. So we have to give them some kind of protection.
Okay. Thanks, Deb. By the way, great yard sale on Saturday and Sunday.
It was.
I got there
Thank
early
you.
and picked up some tools. All right, so thank you again. Paul, who's up next?
Yeah, Dave McLaughlin's on the call. He's got Article 8, which is the Parker Road parcel to be acquired by the Conservation Commission.
And there's
Yes,
Dave,
Dave.
and Dave, you're unmuted,
There he
so
is.
welcome.
I think I'm on. Paul, I think you all have a small map available to take a look at. There's a piece of land that's a
You pull that up, Ken, slide 18.
Yeah, you're just gonna have to give me one.
tenth of an acre on,
Hold on a second,
Yeah.
Dave.
It's on slide what?
It's slide number 18. Article 8.
You gotta just go back to it, so just, it's,
some background. As you know, the Conservation Commission is responsible for almost 1,100 acres of open space conservation land in the town. And part of our objective is to try to identify ways that people can walk from one reservation
up at
to
all?
another one. It's not too easy to do because most of our reservations are separated by a bit of property. With the acquisition of the Warren Poll property, it has an entrance from it across Parker directly onto the Wright Reservation. It's that small blue that you see in
looks
your,
like an eye.
in your slide. I'm sorry?
Looks like an eyeball or like an eye.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly whether we will do that or not. We need to understand what's going to happen to the Warren Poll property, and we need to understand the needs and requirements and desires of the abutters. But it is conceivable that we could allow people to cross from Warren Poll directly onto the Wright Reservation. And that would join those two parcels. Wright Reservation is, what, 26 odd acres, I think. And also, Wright Reservation, if you're willing to run the traffic risk on Acton Road, you can walk over to Robin Hill. And if you walk the other way of Wright Reservation, you can walk all the way over to the Chelmsford Golf Course and then further down to Concord Road. So this is probably a pretty inexpensive way to acquire a piece of land that would join these two parcels. That's all I had.
Okay. Let's go. Was that the first slide to 8? Yeah, there you go. So there you're looking for 16,200?
I think that's the only slide, yeah.
Okay.
Paul, it's back to you.
Yeah, I think that's
Any
it.
questions for Dave?
No.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Is that something that could be used with one of the preservation funds? Like a sliver like this?
You could. Problem is we can't now because in order to use community preservation fund monies, you need the community preservation fund support. and you need to have that on the warrant, and that's not in
Right.
this article. And the reason it was just a de minimis amount, we're talking $16,200.
Okay, thanks, Dave, for taking your time tonight.
Thank you, guys.
I don't know if there are any other people on the call regarding any of the other articles. I don't know how you want to proceed at this point in time. You've heard the presentation, as you mentioned, at the tri-board meeting. I know you saw it at the finance committee meeting. How do you wish to proceed at this point in time? Because I know you're not going to vote this evening, but do you want me to review all the remaining articles, or do you want? That's why I'm
I
asking. Or
agree
do we
with
just move
Emily
on?
on that.
Yeah, okay,
I
all
think
right.
we've heard
Okay,
them
exactly.
many
All right. Okay, all
times,
right.
like,
Then-
this was
then we can
new,
move on.
this was
Is
new,
there-
but we've
Exactly.
seen the
That's why I'm
others.
asking.
Is there anyone from the Board of Health
I don't
here that wants to weigh in on the sewer article at
don't see
all?
any. I don't see anybody on the call.
Okay.
That's where I'm looking.
Yeah, I'm going down at 2. I don't see,
I invited them. I invited the.
we're down to only 19 people left on the
Okay,
call.
so,
We started
so
with 30
do any
something.
of those 19 people have anything to say about these articles? Might be another way to,
So do you want
Does
to
anybody-
ask everybody that's
no,
waiting,
no, I'm just saying,
if anybody has any
if they want to
purpose
yeah.
to chime in, weigh in on an article that's pending, we can discuss it, but if not, I mean, while we're waiting for Zoom, I'll speak just quickly to the wildlife article again,
We've heard enough about that one, too.
what's that?
Heard enough about that one,
Well,
too.
you know, now I understand the finance committee wants me to appear in front of them
Well,
on
then,
Thursday to
good
address
for
it, and that's
you.
fine, and I don't know if I can make it, but I'll get in touch with Jim on that. You know, and I just want to, again, be clear, because it's amazing to me how many times you have these meetings and someone asks a question which has already been discussed 20 times. So this was brought forth to me by a resident in town who had a very large flock of turkeys in his yard. And since that, and his name's Ed Baroda, and I'll see if he can be around on Thursday night to speak to the finance committee with me. But since that time, when this has come up, I have been kind of amazed with how many people have reached out to me to say, I have a similar problem. Someone told me they had a neighbor putting out food at night for one skunk, and now they're up to 5 in this gentleman's yard at night. And they've had raccoons visiting along with the skunks. I've had someone else chime in a different, total other end of town. They have a flock with a family behind them. 3 members of the family are feeding a flock of turkeys, and it's grown quite substantially. And again, then I have someone else who says unintentionally they have somebody that's been feeding and now, well, putting out trash, but in an unsecured area, understanding that raccoons come, and they think it's cute, and they tape it with their security cameras. And then, of course, you have the black bears that are visiting everybody's bird feeders. Not intentionally, but you don't want to restrict the bird feeders. That's a separate issue. But it's the intentional baiting almost of these wild animals so that you can have them come visit and have them in your yard is what we're trying to prohibit. And it's not safe for the animals to feed them this way, and it's not good for, in some of these instances with these turkey flocks, it's just for health reasons. You know, there's droppings on all over the yards, on their porches, decks, roofs, and it's getting a little out of control. So that's where that stemmed from, and I just wanted to address that tonight.
What amazes me about the raccoon thing is and I just pulled it up because earlier today or yesterday or sometime when I had a minute and I was flipping through my phone, I've just pulled it up, on September 24th, there was an article on San Francisco's raccoon problem, which comes from people feeding raccoons. And there's this picture of a little boy on a scooter, and there are 10 raccoons all hanging around. They're like, you know, that far away from him, and they're waiting for food. And these are wild animals. You don't feed wild animals. Like, yeah.
I just want to add to what Ken said. There's been questions about, are we levying requirements on people through this bylaw, the animal control officer and the police? We've had all of those people come and review the document and give us feedback, so I want to make sure that's clear. And we also asked animal control at one point, what other recourse do you have? And there is none right now except education.
Can we put fines in there? Because I really think at this
AML.
point, like, the message is not getting through despite ample evidence.
There's fines in
Okay.
I'm
there.
just
once they get to
clarifying
the
the
third.
bylaw questions
Alright.
that I've gotten,
Yeah.
not,
All right.
so.
Okay. So with that, back to you, Paul.
No, I think that's it. I think that's the end of the agenda item. The only thing I have for the board is appointments. I have 3 appointments this evening for your confirmation. They're all for terms that would expire at the end of this fiscal year on June 30th, 2021. One is the Recycling Committee, Mary Beth Hayes. And then for the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee, it'd be Brian Kramer and, yeah, I'm trying to draw his.
Daniel Rokas.
Daniel Rokas, yeah. Just put my glasses on, it would help. Thank you. Daniel Rokas.
I will make a motion to approve the town manager appointments of Mary Beth Hayes to the Recycling Committee, Brian Creamer and Daniel Rokas to the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee, all for one-year terms expiring June 30th, 2021.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All right, so then, the next topic is the select board regular meeting start time. We had a discussion last week about, moving the select board's start time to 6 PM. Was that the gist of it?
I think so.
Versus 7, and we're just looking to have a discussion on that.
Or just earlier than 7, if it's 6:30, I don't care.
6:30, something.
Oh, I think
Does earlier work for people or preferred?
six works for me.
6 works for me.
Most nights it's gonna be fine. There might be the occasional night, but as of right now, that's fine, so.
I mean, I don't want to, what I'd like to do is sort of like a liquor license, have our discussion tonight, let everybody know that we're thinking about moving it to 6, and then we'll address it at our next meeting.
So we could start like after town meeting at
Right.
the earlier time.
I think,
And maybe make an announcement at town meeting too, that we're thinking about moving it to 6.
you know, the other thing is that, something else we'd talked about in the past, and I forget whether it was like open table discussion or what, but I think Ken, you and I were musing about having people, like open session, you can talk about what you need to, but given that the meeting minutes or the meeting agenda is put out in advance, if people could submit like a summary of what they want to talk about.
Well, then they'd be on the agenda, not an open session.
I mean, but it's still like, just in terms of, you know, people saying, oh, well, I need to get home and get dinner on, and then I can't, you know, tune in and speak up or show up at the meeting to talk. I don't think we're going to be having in-person meetings with members of the public anytime soon, like unless.
I mean, I guess if what you're saying is you want people to have the ability to send something in to us.
They do
I mean,
it
I
now.
guess, right, they do now. They ask us
Right.
to read it into open session.
Yep. And I think that might have come about even more so because of the lack of actual humans
Are
at
you-
most of our meetings.
Right.
But
So I don't know.
George, how do you feel about the 6 o'clock time?
Fine with me. I have no problem.
Okay.
I think it's probably better.
So we can.
Paul, can you accommodate that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm here.
Paul's like, hey, go home
I'm
earlier.
here. 5 o'clock at 4, yeah.
That doesn't mean can you get to draw it out longer at the end of the meeting.
Well, I think now if we're going to do that, if our hard stop is normally 11, we make the hard stop 10.
I didn't know we had a hard stop at 11. We've never
do we?
hard
Or there
stop.
have been a
Well, I know-
couple of
I know
nights
we
when
don't, but
haven't,
we-
so, you know.
I know when it gets to the 11 o'clock hour, we're all sort of putty in our brains anyways,
Oh,
but
God.
I agree with that. It shouldn't then allow us to, you know, make longer meetings. I don't want that to happen either. If that's the way we go, let's start them at 8.
There you go, or 10.
All right,
I
so
mean-
I think let's just keep the discussion open. We'll wait for anybody to respond with input. We'll announce it at town meeting, and then we'll make it official after town meeting. Does that make sense? Maybe the first meeting after town meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll start at 6, and we'll make an announcement at town meeting. Because I just don't want to surprise anybody. You know, they say I logged in, it wasn't there, what happened? You didn't tell anybody?
Well, people will say that anyway.
Well, I'm sure, but, you know, as much as we can dilute it, that'd be helpful. Okay, meeting minutes?
Do I need to read all these or? can I-
No.
Okay.
A through L is presented.
Yeah.
does anybody want to clarify why these are on here, or we just release them?
I mean, we could, I mean, most of them have already been released
Right.
inadvertently anyway, but they do have to do with litigation, and it probably makes things easier all around to have them released. They've already been approved, this vote is to release them to the public.
So I'll make a motion that we release the select board executive session minutes as presented in the packet.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That brings us to Select Board Member Liaison Reports and Referrals. Anybody want to go first? George, you got anything?
I'm all set, thank you.
Emily?
That's
No.
the
Pat?
Just a couple of things. The census has been in the news a little bit again recently, and just want to remind everybody that hasn't replied to the census to be sure and do that. I've heard 3 different days for when the deadline is going to be. It's either going to be September 30th, October 5th, or October 31st, but whatever way, if you haven't responded to it, if you could. Chelmsford has done very well as far as responding to that. We're well over 80% response rate, and my understanding is that once you hit 80%, they consider it a job well done. So congratulations to the town of Chelmsford for another job well done. The other thing is, a couple meetings ago, I mentioned that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee was going to do a rail trail count, which they did on September 12th. Over 2,000 users were counted that day in daylight hours, which is
amazing.
about a 25% increase over the best previous, count that they did. So obviously, with more people staying home, they're getting out and walking and riding and skateboarding and everything else on the trail, and it definitely is a benefit to the town and the surrounding communities, really. I mean, it's amazing how much it is used, so just wanted to report that. That's all I have.
Okay, Virginia?
The school committee just wanted to mention that the schools had a successful reopening, and both the students and the teachers are working very hard and well in the hybrid and remote models. The age-friendly Chelmsford Action Plan is moving along smoothly in its review process, so when they're ready to present that, we look forward to seeing it.
Okay. I had alluded to it earlier, but I attended the Garrison House yard sale yesterday, and it was pretty well attended. The parking lot was pretty full when I was on Saturday, I'm sorry. But it was 2 days, and they did a great job. There was a lot of items. If you've never been to the Garrison House, it's a great, again, another jewel in Chelmsford where you can go and get a look back at what it was like, a couple hundred years ago. And it's also the site of one of the 2 remaining purple beech trees that came from the town common. So it's a great property to walk, and so if they next function, stop in and see them. And then we found out tonight, just before the meeting, that Sandy Donovan, who headed up the food pantry for many, many years in town, had passed away last week. It's now on Facebook, so I heard it, and now I see it. So she was, I think, 81 years old, and I met Sandy when I started giving some time with my sons there, and dry sense of humor, but a great lady, and she'll really be missed. She was such a great driving force in the community to help people who were struggling with food and hunger. So
Yeah, and she worked there, it has to be 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And she didn't, she didn't take anything out of that. I mean, she lived on the bare bones minimum. I don't know how she did it, but God bless her. She donated so much time. Just fantastic job she had done. All right, with that, I'll check the chat rooms for any press questions we might have. I don't see anybody on that's with the press. And we're down to 15 people, and I know pretty much all of them, so I think we're good there. George, just a little instruction before we go into executive session. I think we're going to have you, I'll call you on my cell phone and put you on speaker, and we're going to kill the Zoom meeting.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, what about Paul Haverty?
He's right out there. He's outside, it's waiting.
Okay.
We do need a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to regular session, to discuss the strategy with respect to litigation regarding Ledge Road commercial truck traffic volume.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Roll called, Ken.
Roll call, George?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Pat?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
I vote aye. Okay, thank you.
Good job, Sonny.